Channel 8 Studios, this is Let's Talk Live.
Up first today, people always say this, that you should never, ever make assumptions. And if you do, that's going to get you into trouble.
Yes, but our next guest is here to say that some assumptions can actually empower your life. And communication expert Stephen Gaffney is back to tell us all about this. Hi, Stephen.
How are you?
So, you know, when I stared reading about this, I started thinking about what that famous saying is about assumptions. Assumptions will make a you-know-what out of you and me. But you're saying that there are some assumptions we can make. Which
Absolutely.
ones?
Well, so, you know, by being in the workplace, I've discovered that some of the best leaders, some of the best people that take a lot of action in life, they actually have assumptions that empower them in their life. So first, here's the first one. Assume that whatever somebody's telling you is not the full story. Now that seems suspicious, right? But here's the problem. Have you ever had someone in your life who you can't seemingly make happy? They say, well, I'd be happy if you did this. So you do that. Well, I'd be happy if you did that. You do that. Well, this. And finally you say, somewhere along the lines, I can't seemingly make that person happy because something else is going on. So I call this the truth assumption. Because when you really realize that what somebody's telling you initially is not the full story, you can discover what the real issue is. I mean, think about your profession, right? The difference between mediocre journalism and great journalism is this assumption. When you interview somebody, is assuming there's more to that story, so you ask probing questions, and then you find out what's really, really going on.
All right, well, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of husbands and wives can relate to that one, Stephen. Because, you know, husbands or wives that try to constantly please the other and they're not getting it done, and then they wonder, well, what is the real thing that you want, right?
Absolutely. See, here's the problem is somebody might say, you know, listening to us, okay, I got that. But here's the big problem. When somebody says something to us and they're upset, they sometimes say inappropriate language or they might use the wrong tone. So we react. But the problem is if we react, we shut down the conversation. If you think to yourself, you know what, there's probably more to this story, so I'm going to let this pass and go to what the real issue is, then you don't get hooked. You don't get bothered by people's initial reaction because you're thinking there's more to this story, and that's the key to solving so many issues.
All right, another thing we should assume is good intent.
Oh, absolutely. Assuming good intent.
Think the best of people.
Well, absolutely. Have you ever met, you know, let me just say it this way. I've never met anybody who said, listen, don't tell anybody, but I'm trying to screw it up here. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to screw it up, but don't tell anybody. Nobody's thinking that way, or very few people are trying to think this way. Now, somebody might say, oh, I know somebody who's trying to screw it up. Well, there are exceptions to every rule in life. But you don't run your life by the exceptions, you run your life by the rules.
You know what I always say? Yeah. People are doing the best they can.
With what
Even if it's not measuring up, they're doing the best they can do.
Absolutely. So when you assume good intent, you use a better tone. And tone is 5 times the impact of the words we say. So you want to try an experiment?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so let's try one. All right, I want you to say this line. What are you doing? And I want you to say it first, assuming ill intent. Say it. So what are you doing, but assuming like somebody's screwing up.
What are you doing?
Now say the same line, assuming good intent.
What are you doing?
There's a huge difference. So people often say...
They're going to respond to you better if you do it the second way.
Here's the key. Assuming good intent encourages the person to open up the conversation. Assuming ill intent shuts down the conversation. In fact, if you think about it, if somebody's ever had assumed ill intent, you don't sit there and say, wow, I really want to open up and tell the person what's on my mind. You just say, forget it. So assuming good intent doesn't mean ignoring the problem. It means the way you approach the problem is saying to yourself, you know what, that person has the best of intentions. I'm going to use a better tone. And when you have the right tone, remember, tone is 5 times the impact of the words we say. So often somebody might say, well, I didn't say anything wrong. Well, you didn't, but it was the tone that you used.
Yes, I've got to work on that one with my kids. I think sometimes I'm assuming that they're up to no good when they're really innocent.
And you're saying, what are you doing?
Exactly. What are you doing in there? I know you got to be doing something wrong.
And I bet they say, oh, let me open up, Mom. Let me tell you everything that happened today in school.
All right, so this is a good one. Heaven forbid we could be wrong, right? But you should assume that you could be wrong.
Yeah, assuming that you may be wrong. In fact, I do an exercise that can prove to people that we are more wrong than right on a daily basis. In other words, most of what's going on in our head is more wrong than right. So somebody might say, well, that depresses me. But here's the thing. Have you ever met somebody who's on the flip side of this assumption, who assumes that they're always right? They're what I call self-righteous people. People who believe that their self is always right. You know, they shut down a whole organization and teamwork and at home, right? They're very difficult to deal with because they're basically saying, I have nothing to learn.
That's
and
right.
they don't ask questions. But if we assume that I may be wrong, I'm going to probe better, and I'm actually going to ask questions. Now, somebody might say, well, I know somebody who asks questions, but it's their tone. Absolutely. So this comes back to self-righteous, right? If somebody might ask some questions, but if they may not listen to the answer because they believe, oh, they know the answer, right? Have you ever met somebody who asks you a lot of questions, but they don't listen to the answer? Somewhere along the lines you're thinking, they think they know everything. So if we assume we may be wrong, I call this the humble assumption. This is where we say to ourselves, you know what? Life has so much to offer, and people are really wonderful, and I'm going to learn from them. So we learn from each other by assuming that, you know what, I don't have the answers rather than assuming I have all the answers.
You never know everything, and you are never too old to learn.
Absolutely.
I love that humble assumption, Stephen. Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to put that into practice as much as I can. Thanks for joining us today. Stephen Gaffney, communication expert. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
And we will be right back with much more Let's Talk Live after this.